What is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
Well, obviously follow Jesus. That's like the most important one.
If you lose your way, get back up again. It's never too late to get back up again.
Life gives you lemons, you should make lemonade. And another piece of advice that's been important in my life is
Dad said that I didn't need to start dating for another 40 years.
I can only control the things that I can control. The stuff that I cannot control, I gotta learn just to let it go. Be like Frozen. Let it go.
So last week we talked about King Solomon, and today we're going to talk about his son, Rehoboam. Because Solomon turned away from God, God said he was going to tear the kingdom away from Solomon and his son. But while he was still alive, there was a man named Jeroboam who basically started to wreak havoc on the kingdom and rebelled against Solomon. And after Solomon died and his son Rehoboam succeeded him as king, Jeroboam, the rebel, came to Rehoboam, the new king, and said,
King Rehoboam, your father put a heavy yoke on us. Please lighten the load and we will serve you.
Oh, Jeroboam, Jeroboam, go away for 3 days, and I'll think about these things, then return. Call the elders. What is your advice?
King, today, if you will be a servant to the people, and if you serve them and give them a favorable answer, we believe these people will serve you for the rest of their lives.
Wonder what my homies would think. Hey, friends from my youth, give me your advice.
Hey, King, you should tell them. Get this. My little finger, it's thicker than my father's waist. Yeah. And my father, he made it heavy on you, a heavy burden, but I'm gonna make it heavier. And my father scourged you with whips, but I'm gonna scourge you with scorpions.
Approximately 10 hours later.
You think that my dad's yoke was heavy? I'm gonna double that weight. You know what? I'm gonna make it so heavy and hard for you guys that you can't even hardly move. My dad, he scourged you with whips. I'm gonna do it with scorpions, yo.
So that's exactly what Rehoboam did, and it did not go well. The people rebelled, Rehoboam almost lost his life, he barely escaped, and people made Jeroboam king over all of Israel. Now only the tribe of Judah remained faithful to Rehoboam, so this is where the nation of Israel became split. It became two different nations, Israel and Judah, and they were constantly at war against each other. In chapter 12, we find out that this split was God's doing, for God had chosen Jeroboam to be king. But even though God had chosen Jeroboam, Jeroboam didn't choose God. And what he thought was a smart political move, he actually set up 2 golden calves and he led all of Israel to worship these false gods. You see, Jerusalem was where the people worshiped God. It was where the temple was. And he figured that Jerusalem, still being under the control of Rehoboam and Judah, if the people went there, they would start going back to Rehoboam. So this smart political move ended up being the start of his demise, because obviously God was not pleased with him. We found out from the Bible that Rehoboam also allowed idol worship, which probably included temple prostitution and child sacrifice, not good stuff. And in chapter 15, we find out that Abijah, his son, was exactly the same as Rehoboam. Isn't this crazy? David was the best king of all of Israel. He unified them, repented of his sins, did all sorts of great things. But then just 2 generations later, his own grandson is leading the nation and separating the nation and leading them into idol worship.
It's just crazy.
So what can we learn from this story today? There's a lot, but we're going to talk about advice. So whose advice do you usually listen to? Rehoboam made the mistake of listening to the young people in his life instead of the elders, instead of those with more wisdom and more knowledge and more experience. And honestly, I think this is something that a lot of us young people do. Instead of listening to people that we know have really good, trusted advice, we go to our friends or we go to Uncle Google or whatever. And oftentimes these things aren't the best thing for us. Just in the past couple years, I have tried to find people in my life who are older and wiser than me. And when I need to make really big decisions, I go to them and I ask for their advice. And oftentimes they see things completely different than me, which is really good. And they do a great job of pointing me back to Jesus when I'm struggling. And of course, the best place that we can find our advice is in the Bible, which is why we do Weird Bible Wednesdays. We need to get into this book because it is God's word, and here is found wisdom. In conclusion, I want to talk about Hebrews 11. So in this chapter, God lists a bunch of people who were not perfect by any means, but they had really good faith. They trusted in God. And in Hebrews 12, it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, so all those imperfectly perfect people, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that easily entangles us, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. I think the message of Rehoboam and Abijah is pretty much the same. I believe God included these men in Matthew's genealogy, hopefully so that we could learn from their mistakes. Let's throw off all the sin that entangles us. Let's listen to good advice. Let's run with endurance the race marked out for us. Let's remain faithful to God. But even when we aren't faithful to God, He is still faithful to us. Happy Wednesday, you guys. We'll see you later.